everybody, and welcome to Nerdy 430, the podcast where my buddy Tim and I talk about nerdy things that we have seen lately. My name is Kevin Bauer, and today we are talking about Jupiter's Legacy on Netflix. Tim, what did you think of this?
I liked it enough to watch all of it.
Okay.
I enjoyed it enough to keep going. I wanted to know what happened. Definitely flaws in this. Here's something I'm having a hard time with now, Kevin. There's so much superhero content. You and I both love reading our comics. We love reading our comics. I love watching my comics. You make a superhero thing or a comic book movie, I'm going to watch. I'm going to check it out. I think I've lost my ability to tell if something is an original idea or not, or if it's all just an amalgamation of other ideas. It seems like every superhero now is like a chimera. They're just taking pieces we're all familiar with and rearranging them slightly. And a lot of the times it's enough to just keep me interested and get me hooked. But I really had a hard time telling if this show was telling a new story or not. What do you think about that? Is this an original idea? Is there anything about this that stands out to you as like, I can't believe we've never seen this before?
You know, Tim, I'm glad you brought this up because superheroes are my thing. Superheroes are a thing that I am completely and totally obsessed with and have been since I was probably like 11 or 12 years old. I really, truly love watching all these superhero things, reading different iterations. And one of my big pleasures is anytime a creator makes like a new superhero universe, getting a feel for how the mechanics of these things work in that universe. So, you know, what the relationship between the superheroes and society are, what the relationship between the heroes and each other are, how they train young superheroes that are coming up, all that kind of stuff. I've been inundated with so much superhero shit that I don't care about the fight scenes for the most part. I care about the mechanics of how the world works. I like seeing how they adapt that. That's what I'm huge on. And what I loved about Jupiter's Legacy is that in the comic version of this, they did an extremely good job of portraying how these superheroes, how this superhero like society worked and how they had the whole thing set up. It really felt like Mark Miller, who is a huge name in comics. He's behind a lot of series that everybody has seen the adaptations of now. His work on a series called The Ultimates formed the basis for what the MCU Avengers movies are made out of. And so he, in a lot of ways, is kind of pioneer of what we see as superhero culture now. This was a way for him to go through and kind of clean up 20th century superhero lore in like a very streamlined fashion. And so I was there for it. I think by design, this is an amalgamation of things we've seen before, but it's him trying to sort it out. It's him roping everything in, getting a feel for like all these other ideas that have been brought up in other places and trying to create like a very streamlined version of it.
That feels like the kind of thing that was revolutionary. How old is this comic? You read the comic. I have not read the comic. I just went into the show blind. How old is this comic? It's like 30 years old or something, right?
No. The comic came out, I think, in 2000. It was 14 or 15, I believe.
Really?
This up. Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, I was just about to say, this seems like a really cool concept for back in the day. I'm sure it was revolutionary at the time. And I don't even know if I can say that. If it came out in the 2000s, I don't know how groundbreaking this is. But the idea of taking something, The Ultimates is a great example. I've read The Ultimates, find that very relatable. And the parallels between that and this make a lot of sense, where you're taking a superheroes in a superhero world and you're trying to ground it in a way that makes logical sense, seems more realistic. You're taking this thing that is completely unrealistic and trying to ground it in a way that comic books just don't ever bother doing, right? If you buy a Spider-Man magazine, you're suspending your disbelief. And there was definitely a turning point where comic writers were trying to figure out, how do I make this like as grounded and gritty and realistic as possible? And I get the idea of that being something that would be groundbreaking at a time, But these Marvel movies, I feel like, have done a very good job of doing that already. And I know we just compare everything against Marvel, but we've been spoiled with good superhero movies that feel very grounded. The Batman movies, Christopher Nolan movies, they feel very grounded. They feel very real. Iron Man somehow feels very real, and it takes place in New York City, and we recognize landmarks when aliens are blowing them up. It feels like they're real and they're here, and this is actually what's happening. So the idea of a TV show now showing what real life for real superheroes is alike just doesn't seem as cutting edge as I'm sure it was maybe at the time, or even, 20 years ago.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, at the heart of that is magical realism, which is the thing that I love more than anything else in a narrative world. And that comes out of being a kid and desperately wanting this stuff to be real. So anytime a movie or a TV show or a comic book portrayed a way that made it seem like these fantastic elements were realistic, it was like crack for me. I loved it because it gave me the ability to suspend disbelief in real life as a kid and pretend, hey, maybe this could really happen. So I think that's the thing that's really appealing to me, right? Is when people find ways to portray these elements very realistically. I love it. I'm there for it. I think in this one specifically, they were held back by the budget to a certain extent. I don't know what the budget was for the show. There are some fight scenes that look really good. There are some special effects in this that look really, really good. There are also parts of it that look really bad. For instance, Josh Duhamel's hair is an old man. His hair and beard as an old man is like a Saturday Night Live caliber costume. It's terrible. But I guess if I needed to pick where the money would be shaved off, maybe that would be
no pun intended.
Put it. We get little hints of what it's like to be one of these heroes and have like the public kind of, watching your every move and looking to you and, opinion polls about whether what you did in a fight was right or not. And it's the kind of stuff that the Marvel movies have had the budget to be able to hire, fucking Anderson Cooper to talk about. Like Anderson Cooper say the word Chitauri, like after the Chitauri attack. And it's ridiculous, but it feels realistic because he's on his set saying that. And so it adds like gravitas to the world. We don't get any of that, but I don't think they could afford that. And I think that would have really helped them.
Even what you're talking about now, there are ways to do this in a way that is gets that point more across that's reasonably low budget. What if there's just an app where you rate superheroes? And this is in a world where everybody's constantly criticizing these people and talking about all this stuff. I feel like we don't even really get that. Like that side of the story that you're talking about now, where people are more critical of these people. It's their popularity. Is almost a bigger part of their superheroics than like what they're actually doing to fight crime.
Yeah.
That's an interesting take on superheroes that I don't remember necessarily seeing, but definitely did not get from this.
I think what is holding this back is, and I think this is something that works better as a comic than it does as a show. It doesn't really have it doesn't seem like it really has a big point to make about superheroes outside of the fact that it is, like I said, kind of trying to portray this. It's trying to portray a very streamlined version of how a superhero world could work. And I think in terms of TV shows and movies, we're past that. We are now to the point where what's really working is when people are playing with the genre. So superhero is almost like the medium that they're painting in. But, with Ant-Man, you get a superhero heist movie. With WandaVision, you get this like really mind-bending take on like the history of sitcoms as a means of Wanda grappling with her loss and her emotional damage. Like it's really when people are doing weird shit that things are shining. And compared to something like The Boys, that is like this incredible take on capitalism, The Boys has such a bite to it that this seems a little bit weaker by comparison.
It definitely does. Compared to The Boys, it just doesn't seem to be. You're right. It's not as biting in its satire. The thing that I really liked about this and don't feel like I got enough of, what I found compelling, was the talk of the codes. And there is a lot of talk of the codes.
Yeah.
It is pretty much all Josh Duhamel talks about is the codes and how important the codes are. where did the codes come from? Sounds like they all just came up with them randomly one day. We don't see them coming up with do we see them coming up with the codes? Maybe at the end they're kind of talking about it a little bit. They're talking about how they can't run for public office. Why did they come up with these codes? Was it a condition of their powers? We don't see any of that. That's the part I would be interested in seeing, right? He spends all this time talking about codes, and we don't really know why they're subscribing to these codes. I would love to know why. But the idea of generational superheroes and the generational disconnect between older, more conservative parents who had a specific code and a specific way of doing things that worked in the world that they grew up in, conflicting that with what their kids are going through, who are growing up in a very different world that ultimately needs a different updated version of the code, I find very interesting. And that's where you hook an audience on human problems, because everyone has that problem with their parents. Your parents grow up, they're trying to do what's best for you and act in your best interest, but the world has changed. It's just not the same world that they grew up in. So they are out of touch on certain things, as we will be for our kids or younger siblings or whatever, right? The next generation is going to be different than our generation was. And that is super interesting. Again, I don't know if we get enough of that, but the moments when they have those discussions between the father and the son and the father and the daughter and the mother and the kids, those are the parts that really suck me in. If they'd focused a little more on that, I feel like this would have been an exceptional show.
Dude, what burns is that is what's next, is they start to address that. So in the comic, it started with, there were 2 series. They've now gone through and streamlined it to make it seem like it was just one series. It was 4 volumes, but originally it was 2 separate series they had running concurrently. One was Jupiter's Legacy that was set in the modern day. The other was something called Jupiter's Circle. I have no idea why the fuck they called it that. It's a weird name. And it was set in the parents' generation's heyday. So it was in like the 60s. Like the late 60s and early 70s. And that was the fun one. Jupiter's Legacy was like the vegetables that you ate so that you could go have fun in Jupiter's Circle. It was where this series really shined, because we've seen a lot of realistic takes on superheroes in the modern day, but we haven't seen a lot of realistic takes on superheroes in the 60s. And so it is showing you some of this like ridiculous stuff that's happening, but it's showing you how superheroes would relate to it. Stuff like I think Patty Hearst is in Jupiter's Circle, and the whole, I forget what that group was called. I don't know if that was Weather Underground or what. But it's like them dealing with some of the weird crises that came up. And I don't know, it's really compelling. One of the superheroes is gay. And so you're seeing that. I don't think they touched on that. They hinted at it a little bit in this first season. You're seeing that from the perspective of the golden age of Hollywood. And all these like rumored things where it's like, oh, did you know that this actor might actually have been gay? I forget what some of the actors were. And like all these rumors about, you know, they had a wife, but they would sneak off and go hook up with like other actors and all that kind of stuff. And just how dangerous that was at the time, and how like McCarthyism was going on in the 50s, and just how, I don't know, they were really taking their lives into their own hands by living their life. And so it puts superheroes into that mix in a really realistic way. And it's really compelling to see. I haven't really seen that before.
Kevin, that sounds amazing. And that is what I thought this was going to be. I thought that's what we were going to see, because that's kind of how you sold the show to me and convinced me to watch, was that it was showing 3 basically generations of superheroes and how they're doing their thing. And that's what I wanted. Kevin, when did you know that it doesn't matter how superheroes get their powers? It's stupid. I don't care how anybody gets their powers. I don't care if it was a spider. I don't care if you were born that way. I don't need to see the rocket crash and you get your things. I really don't give a fuck. We're in a world where there are superheroes. You're a superhero. Cool. I don't need to see where this came from, especially when the thing that gave you your powers has no other impact on you. It doesn't give you the codes. It doesn't tell you how to live your life. There's no rules on how you use your powers. If you don't use them in this way, they could get taken away from you. There's no consequences to you having powers. So just have powers And in all of these flashbacks, oh my God, I can't explain to you how much I don't care about them looking for this island. I don't care about them looking for this island. Flashbacks in general, so boring. We know they get powers. We know they're superheroes. There is literally zero drama in a bunch of characters we know are alive and well in one time in a later timeline, arguing and bickering about how they're going to get their powers. There's nothing. I want to see them starting as superheroes. I want to see them founding their league. I want to see them fighting their first bad guys. I want to see them coming up with the codes. I want to see them messing up. I want to see how they came up with the rules that they are now trying to pass on to their children in one timeline. And then in the later timeline, that the rules that their children are rejecting. That's a story. That's a compelling arc. We are seeing these parents as children learning the lessons they're trying to impart onto their kids, and these same lessons are being rejected by their kids who are going through a whole nother thing. That's where you get that's like a family. That's an ABC drama. That's an ABC TV show. That's that is somehow just throwing some superheroes on there, map some fighting. You've got a hit. That's like a network show.
Tim, you're 100% right. There is nothing less compelling now than how people get their superpowers, because the series that do it really well are X-Men, which catch-all, people are just born with it. Some people are just born with powers. Nobody knows why they're born with the ones they want. Some people are born with it. Boom. That's great. You can have anybody do anything. You don't need to waste time on the backstory of that. And My Hero Academia, same thing. Some people are just born with it. Great. We don't care. If you really are doing it right, if you have a situation that imbues someone with superpowers, in most situations, that would be really tragic. Like, it would be a traumatic event that happens in someone's life. Peter Parker gets bit by a radioactive spider. There's a lot of pain involved in that. He freaks out. The first Spider-Man movie does a good job of it, but it was like a terrifying situation for him. That is maybe a puberty allegory, but still, the Flash gets struck by lightning. Like, these things are hard, man. Static Shock is involved in, he's around this area where like a nuclear power plant explodes. I mean, these things would leave marks on people that, if you're doing it right, you would really need to build into the character. Like, that becomes an aspect of the character's personality, that they've been through this traumatic event. And in most situations, that's not necessarily the story that the person is trying to tell. So it gets tossed by the wayside. And in that case, if that's your case, don't even bother with it. Like, they just start having the powers, and there you go.
To piggyback off of Static Shock, which is something DC needs to leap on. Get us a Static Shock movie, dude.
Static was one of my favorites.
That was one of my favorite cartoons as a kid. I loved it. It was so cool. It's a relevant story. In the world of Static Shock, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, the power plant explodes. Static gets his powers, but so do every single supervillain that he encounters. This is an entire world ripple effect. Mm-hmm. This guy, the same thing that gave him his powers, empowered a bunch of other people in the city. Some of them are good. Some of them are bad. Some don't want to be superheroes. Some want to be supervillains. Then that becomes the story. In this TV show, Jupiter's Legacy. I keep calling it Jupiter Ascending, which is,
I know.
Maybe I'm just
it's like that Channing Tatum movie.
We don't need multiple things with Jupiter as the first word in it. Like, we just don't. We don't need multiple movies. Jupiter's been taken. Call it Mars something, Saturn, like whatever. We don't need multiple Jupiter things that are equally forgettable. When these guys get their powers, it causes a ripple effect and creates other bad guys or something like that, or creates a system of code. If there were real consequences to them getting their powers, that would be one thing. But we spend way, way, way too much time on them getting their powers, which ultimately has zero effect on anything else going forward. Like, I don't know what we get in those flashbacks that actually impacts their lives going forward, other than we see that the brothers don't really get along, which I think there's a million ways you can tell the story of a group dynamic without going 10 years into their past. You can have them bickering as superheroes now, Dude,
one of the other things that holds this back is that so the parents are from the 30s, and the superpowers have just made them live a really long time. I know that the point of that is to contrast the ideals of when superhero comics were first started to the ideals of superhero comics in the 2010s. I think it's maybe too far of a leap when the more relatable connection, the thing that is like something that the readers of this comic actually are having to deal with, is if you add a generation in the middle. Because I'm not arguing with grandparents about the way the world should be. I'm arguing with my parents about the way the world should be. So the ideals have already changed enough from the 70s and the 80s for us to have a pretty significant generational divide. I think you gain a lot by adding a middle generation.
That is interesting. It is weird that all these kids are like the same age too. Like all their parents waited until they were 70 or 80 to have kids. Is that what
it's really weird.
We're being told? Where did all these superheroes come from? If all superpowers originated with what, like the 6 guys who went to the island, did they just all have just been hooking up throughout? Have they all just been trying to have as many kids? Does that mean that every superhero is related in some way to this original group?
It doesn't, but like I think it should. Like,
where do these other
definitely
superpowers come from? How are there other superpowers in the world? Where does Black Star come from?
We don't get a description. I don't know that I need it. I think the only reason that I need it is because we spent so long explaining why these 6 people specifically have powers and then no time on the other 100. So like, I would maybe just take a catch-all of like, people have superpowers. That's it. And go from there.
Right. But how can we do that after we've spent a third of the series about how these guys got their powers? You've conveyed to me the importance of how people get their powers, but made it irrelevant for every other superhero that you encounter in this thing. It doesn't matter how the bad guy got his powers. It just matters how these, whatever, 7 or 8 or whatever number of people got their power. It's all over the place. Kevin, do you have a, when did you know?
Yeah. When did you know? I'm curious, as someone who didn't read the comic, when did you know that Walter was really going to be the villain?
I had an inkling early on. I don't know if I spent a lot of time thinking about it, but the idea that he's telepathic instantly makes him questionable to me. And in all the flashbacks, they show him as a very like, he doesn't get along with his brother. He's part of the main feud is between him and his brother. His brother's the most powerful for some reason. He's not as strong as his brother, but he's able to get in people's minds and manipulate them. He's not able to manipulate his brother's mind for some reason. So obviously something happened where he like was trying to get in his brother's head and couldn't do it or whatever. It definitely planted seeds where I was not surprised in the ultimate reveal that he is responsible. I think I found it a little disappointing that was the twist. Why is it taking so? All these characters are now what, 100 years old? Why are they now just coming to a head in this way? What happened to Shadow Fox? Is he alive? Is he still the villain? Is he around? I found him a very compelling villain. I found him a more compelling villain than the brother betraying his brother, if that makes sense. Why would a close friend turn on his friends because of their codes, which they adapted in some, like the villain they built up was very interesting to me. And instead they say, no, this is just a betrayal from within. But why I didn't like it, maybe is my answer to that question. When did I know? It doesn't matter when I knew. I was bummed when I found out.
What burns, man, is that I know what's coming. I don't know how they're going to do it in the show compared to the comic. There's a lot of stuff they did in the show that's a lot better than the way they did it in the comic. And I hate being comic guy because I think if you're making an adaptation of something, you should not be beholden to the way that it was in the source material. You are inherently creating something new. I think you should take it as a starting point and run with it. The only reason I keep bringing it up with this specifically is because there are so many story points that were done so well in the original material that I really hope they bring some of those story points over into the show. The show in general did a much better job with the modern day shit than the comic did. So I'm really hoping the same thing carries over to the more interesting stuff in the comic, because if they do a better job of it in the show, then we're in for a real treat for seasons 2 and 3. So I know what's coming theoretically, and what's coming is so good. It's so cool. The interpersonal conflicts, what the whole thing does that's so good overall, that makes me love the series so much, is we are seeing these interpersonal conflicts. We're seeing the start of the interpersonal conflicts decades before, and then we're seeing the aftermath of them in the modern day. And it's awesome to see how things have festered over the years. And so it's like, I want you to know the source of these conflicts so badly, because I think about it all the time. I think about it in terms of like character dynamics all the time.
So the comic way better than this show is the impression I'm getting from you.
It's hard because the first volume of the comic that dealt with like the same source, the first volume of the comic is the same deal, where it's like you get your modern day stuff and you get flashbacks to how they got the powers in the 30s. And it kind of sucked. Like, I don't know. I wasn't like enraptured by the first volume of the comic. Then I picked up, I think I might have gotten them at the same time, Jupiter's Legacy and Jupiter's Circle. And I picked it up and was like not that excited for it. And Jupiter's Circle, the stuff again that was set like 50s, 60s, 70s, is like electric. I loved it so much. I genuinely think it's one of the best comics that I've read in the past 10 years. It's fascinating. It's so cool. It's all about personal dynamics. It's all about existing within the politics of the time. It's like, it's done so well. So the show so far is better than the comic. Like, for what they've covered from the comic, the show is definitely better. The only reason the comic has an edge on the show, I think, is because the show hasn't gotten to the really good shit from the comic yet.
Interesting.
And I'm really interested. Like, the second season of the show is either going to be fucking unbelievably good, or it's just going to be me spending the next 20 years of my life trying to get people to read the comic. Because, I mean, wow, some of the stuff they uncover is cool.
I might give it a read. I intentionally did not, because I want to be able to recklessly speculate for you. But let's do some categories, Kev.
Yeah.
Beefs. You got any beefs? We've gone through a few already. You got any that stand out?
Yeah. I mean, it's slow moving. It's really slow moving with a lot of these aspects. I think that's a problem that a lot of Netflix shows have in general. I don't know if they're contracted on a certain number of episodes before they start or what. I don't know that it needed to be as long as it was. We definitely spent too much time on the fucking boat. We get that people are struggling with the code. We don't need to see like whole episodes where people are like flip-flopping back and forth on like, oh, this code. What do I think about this code? We get the same effect if they're immediately thrown into a situation where the mom, I forget her superhero name, Leslie Bibb, she is thrown into a situation where like she sees horrible shit go down in the middle of a superhero fight with someone that was trying to do things like, quote unquote, the right way, by the book, by the code. And she exacts vengeance on somebody and kills. We can go right there. We don't need her like ruminating in the meantime. We can go straight from like her being mad that her husband wanted to uphold morals more than save her life, and then have her go and exact the same stuff. It's just a little bit inefficient for my taste.
Did she kill that guy?
Oh, yeah.
She did. I couldn't tell. And she walks out and says something like, oh, he's there, like he's been subdued. I couldn't tell if she killed him or not.
I definitely think she did. I guess it was probably gray area, but I absolutely read that as she killed him.
Okay.
I think it's
agree with
stronger if she does.
It's 100% stronger if she does, which is why I was so confused that it felt like she wasn't. Because it felt like she was holding this whole thing back from Josh Duhamel and all this stuff. And their relationship is good and interesting. And her keeping the fact that she killed somebody from, but also we don't find out that she killed him. It's not on the news. It's not, you think it'd be something that people talk about. There's no confirmation that she killed him. I couldn't tell if she killed him or not. And maybe that's a beef for me, I guess. Two come to mind, which also really remind me of our Army of the Dead pod. The fighting in this, not always great. I don't think Netflix does these superpower fights well. This Dark Star or whatever bad guy fight, almost unwatchable, I would say. They fly weird. They do all these weird stuff. It's just the powers look bad. I mean, it just all looks so crappy. I'll go right into a thief that pairs well with this. The ninja fight scene that happens with the daughter with like telepathy in the alley. That's awesome. And that is right in the tier of violence that Netflix should be going after. They're so good at the street level stuff. They're so good at the Daredevil stuff. That's what we need. More ninja stuff, more street level fighting, more physical combat. Why can't you make these superheroes present their powers in that way? There has to be another way to show these superhero powers that doesn't hang you out to dry with all these special effects.
Absolutely.
That's a beef. Another beef, again, reminding me of Army of the Dead. I don't give a shit about this daughter. Maybe am I just like a sexist asshole or something like that? I just don't care about spoiled rich kids who have a grudge against their parents. Why do they have a grudge against their parents? Because you're trying to tell me how to live my life or whatever. It's like, I don't care. I don't care about spoiled rich kids having like going off and doing their thing. I have to do, I want to be my own person. I got to do drugs. I'm so sad because my parents care about me. It's like, I don't care about this. I don't care. I don't find her interesting. I think she's a great actor and her character is like there's tweaks to her character. Like if she has a real problem, if this becomes like real depressed, like really questioning like what she wants to do with her life, then it becomes like so much better. But it really just becomes like bratty child trying to stick, like hurting herself to stick it to her parents. And I don't find that interesting. I have no sympathy for it anymore. Maybe it's just the place I am in my life or whatever, but like, I just don't care. I just don't care about bratty kids, Kevin. I'm sorry,
man. It might be. I actually really enjoyed that character in this. I think she's really compelling. I liked both the kids, but of the two, she's definitely the more compelling to watch. Actress is terrific, but also I like this idea of like, you're effectively Superman's kid, right? So it's like, how do you live up to the mantle of being Superman's kid? And I think they did a really good job of showing the kind of like celebrity's child thing of at the end of the day, everybody ends up just bringing up her dad at a certain point. And she's got to wonder who in her life is there because they want to be around her and who in her life is there because of her dad. I feel like I'm also biased because I know where the story's going and I know what ends up happening with her. And it makes me very interested to see her. But it's also a situation where they do a much better job with that character in the show than they ever did in the comic. So it's like, it gives me a lot of promise that they're going to pay off the cooler shit down the road even better.
I feel like she's one of the best actors on the show. Her journey is interesting, but it's so, I don't know. It's just tied up in her parents so much that I just feel like it could have been done. It just could have been done better in my mind. I wanted to really like it. She's so good. I mean, she's so good in this, but it just keeps coming back to her parents. And she doesn't want to talk to her parents. And you're always like this and you're always lecturing me. Like if you take that part out of it and it's just trying to live up to the mantle of your parents, like maybe would she be a better character if she got along with her parents?
No, I don't think so. I think the entire thing though is that I'm wondering if maybe this is colored by your own relationship with your parents, where, I mean, I have a good relationship with my parents too. I'm lucky in that way, but I understand like the way that a lot of our peers don't, and a lot of people don't. And I think there's like this level of frustration, this disconnect that she's experiencing that I find it really compelling. I really honestly do. I don't want to change a thing about her.
Maybe it is. Maybe it's great. And maybe I'm wrong. I just always see, whenever I see like superhero just like sitting it out, I'm like, people are dying because you want to get high. And I don't love that. I don't know. Maybe it just makes her unlikable to me. But I also feel, I don't want to get into reckless speculation, but this definitely seems like her trial before coming out the other side and doing something badass.
Sure.
And I kept thinking about that. Like all of this is just set up for her eventual heroic turn that could be really compelling. And I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about this. I could be wrong. Let's talk about thieves, Kevin. I already talked about the ninja fight scene. Do you have any other thieves that stood out for you?
Dude, my biggest thief is the actor that played Walter. I pulled him up, Ben Daniels. so good. Really, really, really enjoyed this guy in this. Wow. It's a situation where pretty much from the beginning of the first volume of the comic, that character is played for like a full-blown villain. There's really no surprise at all. I think by the end of the first issue, you realize that he's like the big bad and he's trying to orchestrate all this stuff against everybody else. And I really like how subtle and empathetically Ben Daniels is playing Walter Sampson. This feels like a real guy. You really feel for this guy. He was right about the Great Depression and nobody would listen to him. Can you imagine how fucking frustrating that would be? Like, he just has to take a back seat despite the fact that he's been right about all these things and he keeps being told that he needs to sit on his hands. Like, it's like we've talked about a million times before with a good villain. They got to have the right idea, but go about it the wrong way. And that's exactly what we're seeing out of this guy. He's so sympathetic. When we see more of him as the big bad villain, it's just going to pay off in spades, man.
Man, you're making me question everything I'm watching. And I feel like the things you're saying, I wish I'd like to really taken away from this. But I
wonder if it's because I know what's going to happen. I'm watching this through a completely different lens than you are.
Maybe it's the context of I don't know if I'm just really biased with my watching, but the things that you were talking about now, I love. And you're right. The idea that this guy is right about everything and it makes him a great villain. And I don't know, that just, it didn't stand out to me that way. The way you're describing it makes so much more sense and makes like, of course he's the bad guy. He's right about everything and nobody believes. That's such a compelling character. And for some reason, when I was watching, I'm just like, this guy is just complaining constantly.
But dude,
you're right. You're talking about the daughter and like how awesome she is. And I'm like, she's just whining the whole time. I'm just like, anytime somebody whines, I'm just like, I don't want to hear it. I'm just not interested to people complaining all the time.
But it's the equivalent of like you're watching Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone for the first time and you're like, why did Snape hate Harry so much? And I'm watching it and I'm like, he loved Lily so much. Like I've got a completely different view of it.
Yeah. Speaking of different views, let's get into some reckless speculation. Kevin,
hell yeah.
I'm going to take the ball with this because you read the comics. I think reckless speculation wise, the Son, I was waiting all series for the Son to die. That dude is as good as dead. I have no knowledge of this. I have not read any of the comics. I haven't done any Wikipediaing. That dude is a goner for sure. And his dad's going to hold him, or something the dad's going to do is going to lead to the downfall of his son. Ultimately, I think everybody ends up getting fucked. And I think this girl becomes the new Utopian. That's where I see this going with the series. She goes head to head with the uncle. Maybe she sides with this Fox guy and his son because they're hooking up. They fall in love. They end up trying to help out the dad, what is his name? Shadow Fox? Sky Fox. Maybe she gets in with Sky Fox. It turns out Sky Fox wasn't really that wrong about everything. And maybe, then the brother is the real evil behind this. And he tricked Sky Fox into doing some stuff. But I think the arc is Son dies. She becomes the new Utopian and comes up with the new rules. And then, as you would say, Jupiter's circle, the cycle continues again. She has a kid. They go through the same exact thing. And then you could keep the series going in perpetuity, really, right? Just each generation just has new kids.
Jupiter's cycle.
So that's what I'm thinking, Kevin. Am I right? Don't tell me.
I'm not going to tell you anything. I am going to prompt you for a reckless speculation.
Sure.
So we know by the end of this first season that Walter is actually doing some villainous shit. And we've been told the entire season that George Sky Fox had turned into the world's greatest supervillain. But in that final episode, we see that, I don't know, there might be more to the story than we were originally told. And for some reason, George really has it out for Walter. What do you think? I want you to recklessly speculate. What do you think happened between them?
Oh, he controlled his mind. George is Sky Fox.
George is Sky Fox. Yeah. Walter is Brainwave.
So Walter's clearly the big bad. I'm beginning to think Sky Fox is framed for all of this. That's what I think happened. Now, I'm just like, Sky Fox is a good guy. He did something. Walter did some fucked up shit to him, or he witnessed some fucked up shit. Or maybe he did some fucked up shit and Utopian was like, we had to do it for the greater good. They leave, or they come up with the codes after the fact. I mean, there's just, I'm sympathizing with Sky Fox. This character seems great. He might have been my favorite character in the whole thing for some reason. Just like I know I hate it when like the kids are spoiled brats, but a grown-up spoiled brat who just is also willing to lay it all on the line for his friend. Like the unwavering loyalty he has to this guy, I just find great. I love it. I'm all about it. I love that in a character. I love commitment in a character, and that guy had it in spades, and I'm all about it. And there's no way he's bad. I'm on Team Sky Fox. I don't care what he did. He could have murdered a bunch of people. I'm going to buy his merch. I'm going to rep him. I'm going to get my Sky Fox was right t-shirt, and I'm going to go out there, go to all the marches.
Let me tell you, you are going to love Sky Fox is my favorite character in the entire series. You are going to love Sky Fox so fucking much. I can't wait.
Should I read the comic or should I wait for the show to come out?
I think you should read the comic because it's going to be hard for you to go through the first volume of the comic, but also the first volume of the comic goes further than this first season did. I don't know how many seasons they're going to stretch this thing out for. They could easily, based on the trajectory of this first one, I would believe that they're going anywhere from 3 to like 6 seasons for the entire length of the show. I think it's worth it to you to read through it. You're going to already see by the end of the first volume of Jupiter's Legacy, you're going to see some shit you haven't seen in the show yet that is going to kind of spark some more curiosity out of you. And you're going to get to read Jupiter's Circle. And it's a fine wine, my friend.
I can't wait. We'll leave it on that. Great pod, Kevin. Great stuff.
Too, man.
You got anything you want to plug, Kev?
I want to plug the comic Jupiter's Circle. I want everybody to go out. Fuck. I mean, like, read Legacy if you want. Legacy is the vegetables you have to eat, like I said, so that when you go back to the second volume of Legacy, which is like the last volume of the series overall, you've seen the modern day stuff play out. You get the background on why the drama was there, and then you get just like a whole volume of payoff later on. It's worth it. It's hard to get through. The first volume kind of sucks, but like, this series is so good.
So you're optimistic that this show is going to rock, dude, potentially?
Based on how good they did with, again, the part of the comic that just sucked, I think they're definitely going to get a bigger budget because they were the number one thing on Netflix for a while. So getting a little bit more money and moving on to the actually fun stuff, I think this thing is going to be awesome. I'm really optimistic about what's going to come out of this.
Fascinating. I got to read this comic because I feel like we had very different views, but I'm excited. I'm excited for it. I definitely want another season. Netflix, keep doing your thing, baby. And you guys should do your thing by listening to more Mess Around Media podcasts. I'll throw one out, Political Therapy, myself and Pat Wise. You think I got hot takes on movies? Just wait till I enter the arena of politics. You can get that anywhere podcasts are sold or streaming. Or do you buy your podcast? You shouldn't. You should get them for free. Thank you guys for listening. Bye.
Bye.